Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. No, noted, Sumanji, noted. Good morning. Local self-government will do separately. I'll take an additional class for it. Today we will be discussing, we have finished polity across the spectrum. Local self-government I'll do separately. We'll take a separate class for each of the two. And today we're going to be studying the civil services. Okay? Now, the first topic is the civil services. Now, first things first, civil services is a conjoint topic, which means it is a common topic to paper 2 as well as paper 4. So, we will cover it in a manner which takes care of both paper 2 and paper 4. The difference is paper 4 is going to be very value centric, whereas paper 2 is going to be more sector centric. So it's going to cover everything plus values. Paper 4 is just about values. Now, we will look at the previous year questions. We will keep paper 2 as the base, and we will see that civil services questions in paper 2 are asked largely in three ways. There is going to be a question either on how the civil services are structured. Two, there is going to be a question on what the role of the civil services is and how that role is changing or should change in the context or in the context of changing circumstances. And three is largely the values that are to be carried forward with respect to civil services. This part values here and this part values here. This is conjoint, which means this part overlaps. Are we okay with this? Do we understand this? Good. Now, the second layer of understanding, civil services is a means centric topic. And I know that this sounds the most interesting because this is the job that we are preparing for. But in terms of exam relevance, for paper 2, the exam relevance is just about moderate. In paper 4, of course, there would be a slightly higher exam relevance because case studies are also based on your different positions in the civil services. Okay, good. What does this mean? This means that for the upcoming prelims, even if UPSC has completed 100 years, you don't really have to prepare UPSC or state public service commissions per se as far as the exam is concerned. Clear? When we look at the larger reforms to civil services, those are answers we would keep in context. So, reforms to structure, reforms to role, reforms to values, or what are the newer values that civil services should have, all of that helps. Now, what I generally like to do with civil services is, and maybe it works, and it most certainly works, is add a little bit of public administration to this discussion. So, if we talk about stuff like new public management, or if we talk about stuff like Weberian bureaucracy and the transition from Weberian bureaucracy to new public management, it is going to add some degree of additional value add to your answers. डू वी अंडरस्टैंड दिस? यहां तक समझ आ रहा है? ये क्लियर है कि सिविल सर्विसेज में पेपर टू में सिर्फ तीन तरह के क्वेश्चंस आते हैं, स्ट्रक्चर, रोल एंड वैल्यूज, और इनको हमें कैसे बेहतर करना है इज द स्टोरी। नाउ वैल्यूज इज कॉमन टू पेपर फोर, जिसको हम साथ में मिला के चलेंगे। एंड देन इन द मेंस पार्ट ऑफ इट, पेपर टू में सिविल सर्विसेज बहुत ही हाई फ्रीक्वेंसी टॉपिक नहीं है। पेपर फोर में रिलेटिवली ज्यादा क्वेश्चंस आते हैं बिकॉज इट्स बेस्ड ऑन व्हाट यू वुड डू एज अ सिविल सर्विसेज पर्सनल और एन एस्पिरेंट और एज एन ऑफिसर। केस स्टडीज में भी हमको ये देखने को मिलता है। प्रीलिम्स में चाहे यूपीएससी के इस साल 100 साल कंप्लीट हुए हैं, ये इतना ओवर्टली रेलेवेंट नहीं होता, बट टू बी ऑन द सेफ साइड थोड़ा सा यूपीएससी के बारे में भी हम पढ़ लेंगे कि भाई क्या था क्या नहीं था एंड ऑल ऑफ दोस थिंग्स। तो ओवर एंड अबव वेदर इट इज मिशन कर्म योगी और एआरसी रिफॉर्म्स, these all have to be applied here, not the reverse. हमें एआरसी को बेस नहीं बनाना है, हमें एआरसी को यहां अप्लाई करना है, दैट इज द प्रिंसिपल। ठीक है, अब एक बार जो हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं उसको हम एक बार क्वेश्चंस के थ्रू वेरीफाई कर लेते हैं। ठीक है, लेट्स लुक एट द क्वेश्चंस दैट हैव बीन आस्क्ड। नाउ 2014 एंड 2015 जब 12.5 नंबर के क्वेश्चंस आते थे, हैज द कार्डर बेस्ड सिविल सर्विसेज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बीन द कॉज ऑफ स्लो ग्रोथ इन इंडिया, क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन। अब यहां पे कंफ्यूजन हो सकती है कि भाई कार्डर का क्या मतलब है, क्योंकि आम भाषा में हमको कार्डर क्या लगता है? आम भाषा में हमको कार्डर का लगता है कि भाई कार्डर का मतलब हो सकता है यूपी कार्डर, कर्नाटका कार्डर, हिमाचल कार्डर, राइट? नहीं, कार्डर का मतलब है द स्पेस, द फंक्शनल एरिया दैट यू आर वर्किंग। सो वी हैव अ जनरलिस्ट कार्डर and then we have some specialized cadre. So the police services for policing, the foreign services for diplomacy, the railway services for railway operations, then you have the audit and account service, ऐसे करके। अब इस क्वेश्चन को देखो तो इसमें क्या दिक्कत है कि ऐसा तो है नहीं कि एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन सिर्फ आईएएस देख रही है, और ऐसा तो है नहीं कि रेलवेज के लिए सिर्फ एक ही सर्विस है। अब जाके वो थोड़ा कंसोलिडेट करना शुरू किया था, आपको याद होगा बीच में इंडियन रेलवे मैनेजमेंट सर्विस, लेकिन अभी भी तीनों में बांट रखी है। टेक्निकल सर्विस अलग है, ट्रैफिक सर्विस अलग है, अकाउंट सर्विस अलग है, पर्सनल सर्विस अलग है। और ऐसा तो नहीं है कि पुलिस जो सर्विसेज है वो सिंगुलरली सिर्फ पुलिस सर्विसेज देखती है, स्टेट सर्विसेज भी है। तो हम जब कार्डर की बात करते हैं तो हमें समझ में आता है कि कार्डर एक तरफ हायरार्की बेस्ड होगा और दूसरी तरफ नेचर ऑफ एरिया वाइज बेस्ड होगा, राइट? एंड थर्ड वुड बी अ टाइप व्हिच इज ऑल इंडिया एंड स्टेट सर्विसेज। तो ये समझ आ रहा है? तो फंडामेंटली इस क्वेश्चन का प्रॉब्लम क्या है? ये क्वेश्चन इफेक्टिवली स्ट्रक्चर पे है और कैसे सिविल सर्विसेज के स्ट्रक्चर से हमारी ग्रोथ कम हो रही है, करेक्ट? अब ग्रोथ इज अ टेंजिबल टर्म, ग्रोथ को हम डेवलपमेंट प्लस गवर्नेंस प्लस इकोनॉमिक बेटरमेंट इसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में देखते हैं, बट है तो ये फंडामेंटली क्वेश्चन स्ट्रक्चर का। इसमें जो स्टैंडर्ड थीम्स लग रही हैं वो क्या लग रही हैं? जनरलाइजेशन वर्सेस स्पेशलाइजेशन। इसमें क्या लग रही है? ओवरलैप ऑफ वर्क। इसमें क्या लग रही है? हायरार्की की प्रॉब्लम, यही लग रही है। प्रॉब्लम यहां पे नहीं है, प्रॉब्लम है कि इसका ग्रोथ पे क्या इंपैक्ट है, करेक्ट? इसका ग्रोथ पे क्या स्पेसिफिक इम्पैक्ट है? ठीक है, आर वी क्लियर ऑन दिस? पक्का? So I have done that last week also. No, this week also I'll take. Don't worry. Last to last week we've done. Sorry. ठीक है. Now, look at the question in 2025 again. जब उस टाइम पे 12.5 नंबर का आता था 2015 में. Traditional bureaucratic structure and culture have hampered the process of socio-economic development in India. टेक्निकली देखा जाए तो 2015 का सवाल 2014 के सवाल का लार्जर वर्जन है और 2015 का सवाल 2014 के सवाल का जवाब है. राइट? जो 2014 का क्वेश्चन है वो 15 में आंसर लिखोगे और जो 15 में आंसर है उसको क्वेश्चन में 2014 में लिखोगे. बेसिकली दैट इज द प्रॉब्लम. इफ यू थिंक ऑफ इट, इट इज वन ऑफ दोज एरियाज जहां पे हमें अपने हाथ बहुत टाइट टाइट रखने हैं. करेक्ट? ठीक है, गुड. सो दिस वाज 2016 एक्चुअली. 15 में पूछा ही नहीं. Then 2017, the only time they've asked a 15 marker. Initially, civil services were designed to achieve the goals of neutrality and effectiveness, which seem to be lacking in the present context. Do you agree with the view that drastic reforms are required in the civil services? So देखा जाए, yes, of course, Tishan. So देखा जाए, this is a question based on value. This is a question based on value, absolutely based on values. And how the first part of the question is about how the structure was made. The structure was made in a way that it gave you such kind of a value. आपने सिविल सर्विसेज को कैसे डिजाइन करा जिससे वो न्यूट्रल रहे और वो इफेक्टिव रहे? तो आपने स्ट्रक्चरली कुछ प्रोविजंस दिए होंगे ना, लीगली कुछ प्रोविजंस दिए होंगे. आपने सिविल सर्विसेज आर्किटेक्चर को कुछ बनाया होगा ना जिससे वो न्यूट्रल है और जिससे वो इफेक्टिव होने चाहिए. करेक्ट? सम कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजंस मस्ट बी देयर. ठीक है, फेयर इनफ. सो it is not just about structure, role and values separate. It's also an interlink between structure, roles and values. Good. Now look at the question in 2020. 14 में पूछा, 16 में 20 में पूछा. ठीक है, मतलब बीच बीच में गैप हमें देखने को मिल रहा है. Institutional quality is a crucial driver of economic performance. In this context, suggest the reforms in civil services for strengthening democracy. Institutional quality is a crucial driver of economic performance. So we're talking about institutional quality. That means we're talking about the quality of civil services, which is basically an issue of structure. It is basically an issue of structure, and then you will sprinkle some role and some value. It is largely about how they're structured. So how they're structured would effectively be how they're recruited, how they're trained, how they are trained post recruitment, in terms of what are the protections that are given to them, are they a still reflection of their colonial legacy. Structure को हम break down करेंगे. But सवाल ये है कि in this context सिविल सर्विसेज का इकोनॉमिक परफॉर्मेंस से क्या लेना देना है कि नहीं? सिविल सर्विसेज का इकोनॉमिक परफॉर्मेंस से क्या लेना देना? सिविल सर्विसेज लार्जली इज सपोज टू बी व्हाट? Exactly. So is it supposed to largely be an administrative role? It is supposed to largely be an implementation role. Is correct or not? Good. So they we're saying we'll keep the base structure. Your reforms to civil services will require where? So we'll add all the things. Keep the base, sprinkle a bit of role, sprinkle a bit of value, but largely it's the same. And then you look at the 2024 questions, both of them, by the way, are 10 markers. So the answer will finish before you even start. The doctrine of democratic governance makes it necessary that the public perception of integrity and commitment of civil servants becomes absolutely positive. This is a value based question. Very good. Doctrine of democratic governance sounds very fancy. It simply means that you are effectively ruling because the people are allowing you to rule. You are custodians of democracy. So, why is it important for civil services in a democracy to be publicly perceived to have integrity and commitment? This does not mean that they cannot have integrity or commitment otherwise, as long as they're publicly perceived to be so, तो चलेगा. ये मतलब नहीं. इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि बस बाहर दिखना चाहिए कि हमको इंटेग्रिटी और कमिटमेंट है. अंदर हो ना हो हमें कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. ऐसी बात नहीं. Are we clear on this? Do we understand this? Very good. Excellent. If you think of it, of all the questions that have been asked in the last few years, it is the 2024 question which is the closest to what is actually written in the syllabus, which is the role of civil services in a democracy. It is the 2024 question that is extremely spot on to the question. Right? Good. Now, 2025, there was no question, correct? 2025, there was no question. Yes or no? Good. Which now means with 100 years to UPSC and 2025 there was no question, is there a very good chance there is going to be a question from here in mains 2026? Doesn't matter. So we can have the best possible answer ready. We don't have to worry about between pre and main 70-80 days. ये तो हम पहले से तैयार करके जाएंगे. यहाँ तो हम बेस्ट ऑफ द बेस्ट आंसर रेडी करके जाएंगे. Right? And they have already asked something core values. So that means the question is going to be either a combination of all the three, or it is going to be a question largely based on structure and rules. And given that you're looking at 100 years of UPSC, a larger contextual question makes more sense. It's either going to be a combination of three: structure, rules, and values, or it's largely going to be, if there's something which is completed 100 years, what is the first question that you would ask yourselves? That are we on the right track? Is there is are we have we evolved to meet current times? How do we need to change to cater to modern democracy, modern economy, modern society and stuff like that? Correct. That is how easy it is to predict questions when you look at a very segmented approach. Yes, correct. When you prepare structure values reform, structure value role, or you hyper focus on structure and roles, You would obviously identify problems and you would also look at solutions, no doubt. But we know for sure there is going to be a question in 2026 on civil services. Simple as that. Now, let us, for how for every theme, how we create a larger, playing area, like how we did for federalism, how we did for parliament, how we did for judiciary, accountability, independence, and we were playing between, we effectively built a playground for us. We effectively built a circumference for us. So what we can now do is we can try and do this here also. So if effectively we have to prepare civil services, and we know that there are largely three areas, three pillars that we have to work on. One is structure, second is the role, and third are values. How do we break it down? Correct. So, with structure, what all do we need to cover? We need to cover the overall organizational framework and classification of civil services. How are they organized? How are they classified? On what basis? Where are the problems? First is this case. Then we look at a larger cyclical approach. We see, acha, there is some recruitment, then there is some training, and there is some in-service further add-on, orientation required at some point. Isn't that the case? This is what we're largely looking at. Makes sense? Good. So organization, classification, recruitment, training, and all India and in service is your general structure. You would top this up with a legal framework. What are our constitutional provisions? If there are any bodies in place, if there are any acts or rules, right? Simple as that. Fair enough. If you notice, very cheekily, they've never asked about civil services corruption, which is not okay. But yeah, yeah, we will write that in our answers. But generally, so the general corruption laws apply. Civil services are not exempt from any corruption law. So that is why. The no, but you will still write stricter corruption laws to make them more accountable. The problem with corruption laws is that they're partially applied to judges. There is a conflict with MPs, MLAs. It's a conflict with high offices like ministers. In civil services, corruption laws apply fair and square. In fact, in truckloads, right? Not just that, apparently, AI generated images are doing the rounds. It seems quite, yeah. Anyway, nonetheless, are we okay with this? यहाँ तक समझ आया? Okay, good. Now, role. Break this up into fragments. What is your role in a democracy? Fundamentally, that democracy has an economic aspect to it. And what is your general role socio-culturally in society? This is of lesser independent significance. It's either democracy or economics, right? This democracy includes uplifting rights, empowering rights, safeguarding rights. It also includes enforcing rule of law and enforcing the law of the land and everything, right? Okay. Now, when I look at values, there are going to be some core values which are timeless, right? Two, there are going to be some traditional values that may require to be upgraded, and there are going to be some contemporary values in terms of how civil services have to be. Because if you think about it, this question, the 2024 question, public perception is a very contemporary variable. 50 years ago, nobody cared or even bothered to worry in the civil services or in the government how are people perceived as civil servants. It today, if you have a question mark on the civil services, whether it's the recruitment process, the training process, and so on and so forth, it's going to have a trickle down effect on so many layers. Yes or no? Does it make sense? Yes. So, this is a question. These two words, public perception, is why there is a question on contemporary values. Correct. If it weren't for the social media pushback in the Pooja Khedkar case, you would have not thought twice about it. It would have been like any other issue carried on beyond a point, right? So, values are some which are core, some which are traditional, some which are contemporary, and of course, the opposites are going to be undesirable. Yes, good. Now, if this is my larger playground, I can add everything that I need to know, or anything contemporary, or anything new, or anything value add to this framework. I can look at lateral entry here. I can combine structure and role and look at the generalist versus specialist debate. I can look at Karm Yogi, which wants to fundamentally reorient the way civil services is supposed to work. It's a value driven change, correct? All your major milestones combined today, post LPG, today are models of development, right? Today are methods of distributing welfare. All of them have undergone a sea change. To give you a simple example, while let me put this in practical context in terms of what we generally see around here, and this should also answer your question if you think the civil services is losing, their charm or all of those things. Now, no doubt, the feudal position that the civil services had, that is decreasing at a rapid pace. You're no longer feudal demigods as you were supposed to be, which basically means that in the rural part of the country where people worshipped you and you had a lot of blanket holy sort of status, that of course is very drastically reducing the my bap mentality, the sab mem sab mentality, whatever it is. Good. But on the other hand, when rapid development and urbanization or conversion to urbanization is happening, civil servants are at a very crucial role. Civil servants are at a very crucial role. Today, for example, let us say if you're familiar with an area called Manesar. Manesar is just a few kilometers away from Delhi. It is in Haryana. Delhi, Gurgaon, everything else is extremely populated, jam-packed, dense. So you're trying to make connectivity and infrastructure better by expanding the number of satellite towns. That is why you have these transit metros and everything that are being developed, right? Good. Exactly. So who would be in charge of ensuring that Manesar's infrastructure is ready and good enough that people can be in Manesar, yet they don't have to necessarily live in Delhi and can commute effectively. Correct or not? That is fundamentally the idea. So that person in Manesar is going to be a person who is going to be a civil servant, right? So the nature and the positioning is changing in the context of everything else. Okay? And because the nature and the positioning is changing in the context of everything else, the role is also changing. Clear? Good. So, this is the context. This is how everything that we study in civil services would eventually come down to barefoot. Done. Now, let us first rationalize and let's first understand why civil service. At the end of the day, there's a larger question as to why civil services? Because they are effectively a permanent and sort of a skilled, if not skilled, an educated arm of the executive. That's the fundamental difference. So why do you need a permanent educated arm of the executive? Because in a democracy, when you're choosing representatives who would eventually also be leading certain charges in government, they may not have the kind of specialized knowledge or even the bare bone knowledge required. And even if they do, there is somebody who is needed, who is trained in the functioning of the government, right? Yes. So you are not just educated or skilled in a general domain or in a specific domain, you are also educated and skilled in the functioning of the government, right? Tomorrow, if a minister walks up to you and says, I want, let us say, I want to fire the Indigo CEO. Now, it is your job as the bureaucracy to tell him how you can or how you can't, or what are the possible actions that can be taken, right? A, because you are trained in the way the government functions. There's a certain structure, there is a certain method to the madness. There are processes that are built, right? And that's also a lot of what civil services training is. A part of your training is to figure out whether you understand how systems work. Something as simple as, all right, the government has to get, let's the district administration has to get a road built. There has to be a process. There has to be a process through which you will identify whether a road can be built, whether a road should be built. You would invite applications from people building the road. You will choose the most cost effective, balancing it with qualitative criteria. You will inspect the road while it is being built. Once the road is being built, before you finally take over, you will do a final check, and then you would finally release the road for public use. Good morning, Yash. I'll keep that in mind. Clear? बेसिक कहानी तो यही है. तो ये सब ड्रामा आपको कब सिखाया जाएगा? कोई तो सिखाएगा ना. आप so this is the larger aspect. So before we get into structure, roles, and values, first we understand the positioning of civil services, which is you're educated or skilled in a general domain, in a specific domain, or in the functioning of the government, and the nature of yours is permanent. Now, take a red and just check. Is permanency going to be double-edged? Yes. To be generally or specifically trained is the same problem as generalization versus specialization. And don't the government functions also have to become smoother with time? We want to move e-office, but are the civil servants trained for e-office? Clear? Good. So this is the general context. Fair enough. Now let's start with structure. So structure from a, मतलब इसको बहुत ही एक टेबल फॉर्मेट में देखेंगे तो क्या मतलब है इसका? हमें ऑर्गेनाइजेशन और क्लासिफिकेशन देखना है. Now, civil services, as we understand it to be from an organizational point of view, we have a hierarchical component, which is group A, B, C, and D. And civil services are organized as All India Service, Central Service, and State Service. Yes or no? Good. Now, classification will have one setup which is cadre based or nature of work based, which is the area that you are working in. That is one way to classify civil services. Second is within all India services, you can have regions of operation. Now, a simple way to redraw this structure for the exam is look at this as a larger classification matrix. Don't unnecessarily do this. If I can say civil services can be organized on the basis of hierarchy, group A, B, C, D, with different roles and responsibilities and different perks and privileges and different qualifications for each level. Then I can say that civil services can be also done on the level of government, which is all India service, central service, and state service. Then I can say they are classified on the area of functioning or cadre. So this is basically the kind of work they do. And civil services can be based on region. Simple as that. This is how we have classified civil services. Yes. And this is supported by part 14, basically part 14, which under articles 308 to 323 cover everything, services under the union and the states, including public service commissions. है ना? So if nothing else, we have to look at certain provisions. Remember something called doctrine of pleasure, which we were, जिससे हमको बहुत दिक्कत है, especially when it comes to governor. The real problem with doctrine of pleasure is actually with civil servants. That is where the heart of doctrine of pleasure lies. Yes. Are we okay with this? Are we fine? So can we look at some थोड़े से constitutional provisions देख लें? And then we'll be able to put a policy around it थोड़ा सा. ठीक. Good. And then we'll move to structure and everything else. But हमको broad मामला समझ में आ गया ना. सारा खेल हमको यहाँ पे करना है. सारा खेला यहीं पे. ठीक है. Let's start with Article 309. 9, 10, 11, and 14. These are the only 4 articles that we really need to know. But writing them in the answers makes a lot of difference. आपको सरप्राइज होगा कि बहुत लोग ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल आर्टिकल्स नहीं लिखते, बिल्कुल नहीं लिखते. ठीक है. Do we see Article 309? Yes or no? ठीक है. Recruitment and conditions of the service of persons serving the union or the state. Recruitment and conditions of the service of persons serving the union or the state. ठीक है. मेरे साथ जरा ध्यान से पढ़ना. 309. Subject to the provisions of this constitution, acts of appropriate legislature may regulate the recruitment and the conditions of service of persons appointed to public services and posts in connection with the affairs of the union or any state. मतलब keeping in mind constitutional limitations, Parliament and state legislatures can make laws to regulate the recruitments. Provided that it shall be competent for the President or such persons as he may direct in the case of services and posts in connection with the affairs of the Union, and for the Governor or such person he may direct in the case of services and posts in connection with the affairs of the state, to make rules regulating the recruitment and the conditions of services of persons appointed to such services and posts until provision is made by or under an act of the appropriate legislature under this article, and any rule so made shall have the effect subject to the provisions of any act. एक चीज, क्या ये सुना सुना लग रहा है that जब तक पार्लियामेंट लॉ नहीं बताता तब तक प्रेसिडेंट गवर्नर अपने हिसाब से रूल्स बना सकते हैं? इज दिस समथिंग विच इज वेरी कॉमन? यस। जब तक पार्लियामेंट उस चीज पर लॉ नहीं बनाता तब तक प्रेसिडेंट अपने हिसाब से रूल्स बना सकते हैं. We've seen the case in judiciary also, right? Ordinance also, yes. Not that they can't. Until they don't, we'll do it. What is very interesting is, ये लाइन आपको बहुत कम देखने को मिलेगी. लास्ट लाइन, any rules so made shall have the effect subject to the provisions of any such act. करेक्ट? ये लास्ट लाइन की बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग सिग्निफिकेंस है कि ये रूल्स आर लाइक एक्ट्स एंड विल आल्सो बी सब्जेक्ट टू एनी अदर एक्ट. सिंपल एज दैट. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि एक्ट और रूल्स को एग्जिस्ट कर सकते हैं. यही मतलब हुआ इसका. सो द प्रेसिडेंट कैन मेक सर्टन रूल्स फॉर सर्विसेज and these rules will still exist if there is an act which is made, as long as there is no violation. These rules cannot violate the act. This is also a type of delegated legislation by notification. By notification. ठीक है? And also at the same time, does this not sound like powers given to the president under 77? Allocation of business rules and transaction of business rules? Yes. I'm coming to that. Yes or no? Good. Yes. Clear? We've discussed this before. For this, we have the civil services conduct rules. Yes or no? Now tell me something. Have we made a law on civil services conduct? Does that mean there is no law on civil services conduct? So these rules would be subject to some existing provisions. Our previous IPC and current BNS, does it have something to do with the conduct of civil services? Yes or no? The conduct of civil servants, yes or no? Is corruption mentioned there? Prevention of Corruption Act, Lokpal, Lokayukt, RTI Act, Benami Transactions Act. So these rules would be subject to these laws. Yes or no? Good. Are we okay? Good. Now do we understand what 309 wants to really do? ठीक. Now let's quickly look at 310, not a very complicated article, but we should read it. This is about the tenure of officers serving the union or the state. Except as expressly provided by the Constitution, very important, except as expressly provided. Every person who's a member of a defense service or a civil service or of an all India service or holds any post connected with defense or any civil post under the union holds office during the pleasure of the president. And every person who is a member of the civil service of the state or holds any civil post under the state holds office during the pleasure of the governor of the state. Clear? This also tells you states have no defense power. So no defense services is ever under the state. Yes or no? Good. Notwithstanding, that means irrespective, that a person holding a civil post under the union or the state holds office during the pleasure of the president or, as the case may be, of the governor, any contract under which a person not being a member of defense service or all India service or civil service of the union or the state is appointed under this constitution to hold such a post, if the president or the governor, as the case may be, deem it necessary in order to secure the services of a person having special qualifications, provide for the payment to him of compensation if before the expiration of the agreed period that post is abolished or he is, for reasons not connected with any misconduct on his part, would be required to vacate that post. इस इतने लंबे चौड़े कहानी का क्या मतलब हुआ? Lateral entry is sort of built in the constitution. इसका 310 क्लॉज 2 क्या कह रहे कि मान लिया that a person holding a civil post under the union, ठीक है, or a state, मान लिया a person holding a civil post under the union or the state holds office during the president, ठीक है, irrespective of that, अगर president या governor under any contract किसी को सर्विस में किसी को काम के लिए लेके आते हैं जो सिविल सर्विसेज या किसी का पार्ट नहीं है, तो अगर उन्हें लगता है तो स्पेशल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स के थ्रू आप कर सकते हो और उनको आप हटा भी सकते हो. क्लियर ऑन दिस? एज लॉन्ग एज इट्स नॉट अबाउट मिसकॉन्डक्ट. ठीक है, गुड. आर वी ओके? बढ़िया. अब सबसे जबरदस्त आर्टिकल, सारी कहानी यहां पे आके बदल जाती है. द डिसमिसल ऑफ पीपल हु आर अपॉइंटेड. So 311 is about dismissal, removal or reduction in rank of persons who are appointed in civil capacities under the union or a state. This is the second last article, then we'll be moving to structure. एक बारी कर लो. Okay. No person who is a member of civil services of the union or an all India service or a civil service of the state or holds a civil post under the union or the state shall be dismissed or removed by an authority subordinate to that by which he was appointed. एक तरफ हमको प्लेजर वाला डॉक्ट्रिन याद आ रहा है, तो भाई अपॉइंट तो प्रेसिडेंट और गवर्नर ने किया है, तो यहां सीधा सीधा लिख देते ना कि प्रेसिडेंट और गवर्नर ही निकाल सकते हैं. क्यों नहीं लिखा? आगे पढ़ोगे तो समझ आएगा क्यों नहीं लिखा. No such person shall be dismissed or removed or reduced in rank except after an inquiry. तो इससे हमने हमारे डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ प्लेजर को रिस्ट्रिक्ट कर दिया. यस और नो? गवर्नर को तो उठा के निकाल सकते हो, यहां बिना इंक्वायरी के नहीं निकाल सकते. यस. In which he has been informed of the charges and given a reasonable opportunity of being heard. ये कुछ प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ नेचुरल जस्टिस जैसा नहीं साउंड कर रहा? यस. Now you understand why I keep telling you natural justice is largely about administrative inquiries. It is largely about administrative inquiries. Yes. Provided that where it is proposed after an inquiry to impose upon him any such penalty should be imposed on the basis of evidence adduced during such inquiry, and it shall not be necessary to give such person any opportunity of making representation on the penalty proposed. ठीक है? This means in a way you cannot question the punishment that is given to you. यही मतलब हुआ ना? यही मतलब हुआ कि इट शैल नॉट बी नेसेसरी कि हम आपको डिसमिस कर रहे हैं, आपको सस्पेंड कर रहे हैं, तो जरूरी नहीं है कि हम आपको मौका दें कि आप उस पर हमसे डिस्कस करें, आप हमसे कन्फ्रंट करें कि ठीक है साल भर का मतलब 6 महीने सस्पेंड मत करो, 2 महीने करो. Further, that this clause shall not apply where a person is dismissed or removed or reduced in rank on the ground of conduct which has led to a conviction on a criminal charge. इसका क्या मतलब हुआ कि आप अगर क्रिमिनली कन्विक्टेड हो, ठीक है, बट यहाँ राइट टू लाइवलीहुड इज कॉन्टेक्स्ट टू स्टेट एम्प्लॉयमेंट. नो, यहाँ राइट टू लाइवलीहुड कहां लगा दोगे भाई? Remember how a member of parliament can do something which can lead to disqualification and criminal action both? Yes or no? Sometimes that criminal conviction will lead to disqualification. Automatic disqualification पढ़ा था ना रूपा में. यही सेम प्रिंसिपल यहां लगा है. अगर आप उसे इसलिए पनिश कर रहे हो जिस चीज की वजह से उनका एक क्रिमिनल कन्विक्शन हो गया बाय अ कोर्ट, तो उनको कोई और इंक्वायरी वगैरह नहीं मिलेगी. ठीक है? गुड. Where the authority empowered to dismiss or remove a person or to reduce him in rank is satisfied that for some reason to be recorded by the authority, it is not reasonably practical to hold such an inquiry. Where the president or the governor, as the case may be, satisfied that in the interest of the security of the state, it is not expedient to hold such an inquiry. ये पूरे ओवरऑल इंक्वायरी की बात हो रही है, ये वाली इंक्वायरी की बात हो रही है. ठीक है? Have they defined any criminal charge? No. So, matrimonial violence is a criminal offense, which used to be 498A IPC, now something similar in BNS. Yes or no? 498A का भी सुना है? That recorded reason can be known to the civil servant. That if it is not good enough, you can go to court. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nishima, that is why you have the administrative tribunals, na? Yeah, yeah. Good. So section 498 AIPC, very popular section on matrimonial. Today is section 85 and 86 of the BNS. It has been bifurcated. Okay. Now, if a civil servant is asking for dowry or is harassing his spouse, right? And if a person is convicted for harassing the wife, can that person face repercussions in his civil services career? Yes or no? Very good. Okay. Yogita, because all civil servants are not necessarily appointed by the president and the governor. Very possible, no? That is right. So, whoever is finally appointing you, a person below that authority cannot remove you. Okay. If in respect of any such person as aforesaid a question arises whether it is reasonably practical to hold such an inquiry, the decision thereon of the authority to dismiss or remove such person shall be final. Clear on this? Prevention of Corruption Act. IPC also has a public servant definition. So, civil servant, public servant are legally two very different things. Public servant includes MPs also, does not necessarily include judges. Civil servant, yeah, yeah, these are legal terms, no? Yeah, 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 yeah. The whole this has been in the news because of the this thing, the now case, right? The POXCO exception, is it applicable to MP MLAs or not? Yeah. So yes. So in POXCO, a specific section, does POXCO definition of public servant include MP and MLA or not? Yes. Exactly. So when we do, and that, now do you understand why I do the whole corruption framework together? Because it is all so scattered everywhere. Good. Can I give of other authority appointing civil services or any person working in the government? If the RBI is appointing, then the RBI can appoint its own officers, right? They're an autonomous body. So if you're working in SEBI, are you not a civil servant? Yes, yeah, I'm coming to that SEBI. Satvik and I are having a serendipity moment. Yes, yes. Technically, if you're an administrative officer in the Supreme Court, are you not a civil servant? No, there's no legal difference between public services and civil services. Civil services is more specific, more narrow. Public services is anything that you do for the public at large and whoever is involved in the process. So does the public need law and order? Does the public need judges? Do the public need representatives? It's a wider spectrum. Are we okay with this? Do we understand this? Are we fine with this? Yes, absolutely. Clear? Good. And then Article 312 has what is called All India Services, which, by the way, has no special relevance for your exam. If you think the UPSC is going to ask you uh, about IAS in the exam on IAS, it's not going to happen. So, are we clear with the legal framework? Do we understand this? Yes or no? Good. So, basic starts with the constitution. Sometimes I have to keep refreshing on my end only. Okay. No, all good. So, finally, something that all of you should know, what is our overall policy or framework with regards to civil services? It is a mix of constitution, a little bit of laws here or there, some rules conduct, some rules made, and some sort of bodies in place. Okay? Now, we've got the Constitution of India, Part 14, yes or no? Articles 308 to Articles 323. Here, Article 309, very specifically, we just discussed, empowers the parliament and state legislatures to regulate recruitment and service conditions. Articles 310 and 11 have basically something to do with doctrine of pleasure, but there are some safeguards built in. There's doctrine of pleasure subject to an inquiry, and 312 largely deals with all India services. Correct? Now, the only law that we have really made is the All India Services Act of 1951, which is basically to deal with uh, recruitment to all India services. It is the only law that we've ever made in the country. All India Services Act 1951. Once you are through the exam, this is a law that you should be very familiar with. Are we okay with this? Yes or no? Yes, it has a total of four sections, but you must generally know what this is. Good. All India Services Act. लेजिस्लेटिव रेगुलेशन एंड देन सब्जेक्ट, जब तक रूल्स नहीं आते तब तक, जब तक लॉ नहीं आते तक प्रेसिडेंट के रूल बन सकते हैं. ठीक है. Now, I wanted to just take a minute and just discuss this with you. ये दिख रहा है? Please take 30 seconds and read these two sections. This is the All India Services Act. Section 2, which is basically definition. In this act, uh, an expression All India Service means the service known as Indian Administrative Service or the service known as Indian Police Service or any other service specified in Section 2A. Other all India services with effect from such date as the central government by notification in the official gazette appoint in this behalf, there shall be constituted the following all India services, and different dates may be appointed for each different periods: Indian Service of Engineers, Indian Forest Services, Indian Medical and Health Service. Out of these, only this has been notified. Yes or no? Good. So when we study health and health governance, and we say that we require a dedicated health cadre in the country, all we say is yes. All we say is that we must implement Section 2A of All India Services Act. Yes or no? Excellent. Something new, no? It's always good to learn something new. Chalo. So basically, under this, no. All India Service only three right now. Recruited by the center and work in state cadres. There are only three services like that: administrative service, police service, and forest service. Hmm? Good. All India services recruited by the center work with the states. Central services recruited by the center work for the center. Center does not just mean Delhi, it could be anywhere in the country where center has an office. State services means recruited by the center, but working for the state means recruited by the state and working for the state. So IRS is a central service. IRMS is a central service. Foreign service is a central service. Even if you're posted in the Embassy of India in London, that Embassy of India in London is with the central government, right? If you're in the, let's say, if you're in the uh, Indian Audit and Account Service and you're posted in, let us say, Bombay, you're still in the central service. No. Rajya Sabha resolution is to add more, that we permit you to make one more service, for which the parliament will have to make a law, make changes to section 2A. Rajya Sabha has already passed a resolution for all India Judicial Service. They have not made a law amending section 2A. Are we okay? Yes, currently only three: administrative, police, and forest. Bilkul Ashish. So basically, it is under this act that the central government, please understand this, this act, yes, this is the All India Services Act. The central government will have authority to make rules after consulting states. Okay? वो बाद में करेंगे दीदी, अभी नहीं करेंगे यूपीएससी सर्विस प्रेफरेंस. ठीक है, बाद में करेंगे, अभी नहीं. Clear? This also shows center stronger than the states. Okay. Now, after this, for all India services, there are certain rules. So there is All India Service Conduct Rules, 1968. Then there are All India Services Discipline and Appeal Rules, 1969. Clear on this? So your larger set of rules on leave, etc., 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 cover. Similarly, for central services, you have the Central Civil Services or the Code of Civil Services. Conduct rules. Similarly, you'll have Central Civil Services rules also. And then institutionally, from a body's point of view, you have UPSC and you have State Public Service Commission. Are we okay with this? Are we fine with this? Yes or no? ठीक है, good. So homework for today, just read this up from the prelims concise notes, uh, and then we'll take up structure and everything else in one go. Okay. Now, do we understand how we are doing social issues, justice, governance? Is that okay? Another 3-4 days and we are done. We'll be able to get it right. In a way that now is our MCMA kids okay? Your MCN kids are okay. This is not too basic. And MCF3 kids were okay. This is not too fast paced. I promised you. I'll give you a middle ground and we'll do this properly. Thank you. दुनिया इधर की इधर हो जाए, बच्चों के साथ गलत नहीं होने दूंगा मैं. थैंक यू. शाम को बताते हैं. दे आर टिल फेडरलिज्म CCN आर देयर. थैंक यू. बाय बाय. हाँ बिल्कुल आ सकते हो मिलने. यस ऑफ कोर्स, आई विल डू दैट. बाय.